Yo, what is up, y'all? Welcome to the Father Built Podcast. My name is Bobby Peacock, and I am your host. This podcast is all about building up fathers in holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And we aim to give you the tools to build your house of legacy. So, if fatherhood is something that you want to obtain to be, or that you are currently in, this podcast is for you. So let's go ahead and jump into it as my phone is just randomly going off in my pocket. So my apologies about that. Let me adjust real quick. Nothing super important here. So yeah, I just kind of want to break a couple things down for like the last time, and then we're gonna have a guest on here, a really good friend of mine who's gonna be coming on the podcast and talking about his life and what he's walking through. He's gonna be our very first guest, so I'm super excited about that. And so yeah, so you know every year in November, I walk through my goals. And a lot of people, they wait like 2 weeks into December or 2 weeks before January or in January to start the new year. And for me, I remember back in 2020, it was November of 2020. I just felt the Lord pressing on me of like, hey, you need to start your goals now. You need to start working on this next year now. And so kind of like what my year looks like. So let's take 2024 for example, even though we're already in 2024 and I'm dating this podcast, but it's okay. So let's take this year, for example. My year of 2024 starts in November. Okay. Because that's when I really start prepping for the year. Technically, yes, it starts in January, but I really look forward to, okay, November is that's where I'm going to lay out my goals and lay out what I want to do for the next year. And so, kind of what that looks like is that there's three main areas that I focus on, but within those three main areas, there are seven subcategories that funnel into those three areas. And I bet you can guess what those three areas are, which is holiness, healthiness, and happiness. Okay. And so by doing it November 1st, by starting November 1st, what I'm doing is I'm being intentional about what my next year looks like. And that gives me roughly around 61 days to really hone in what I want the next year to look like for me. And so sometimes what that also looks like is, for example, in November, I start looking at, okay, what is those goals for next year? And then sometimes in December, I can get a head start and start implementing some of those goals coming into the new year. And so then, January starts and it's like, okay, this is the start of the year. We're going in. There's no turning back. And then usually in July, June or July, I'll do a reset and I'll be like, okay, where am I at? What have I obtained? Have I obtained any of my goals? Have I obtained what I wanted to do so far? And if I haven't, which very much there are times where I haven't obtained some of the certain things, then it's just a hard reality of like, okay, what do I got to do to get to some of these goals, to get to some of these things? And then November, start working on the goals. December, start implementing them. And then at the end of December, also in January, I look back on the year as well to say, hey, what did I do well? What did I not focus on? What should I focus on? And so, and it's all that's a system that works for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for everyone, but I did mention there's the three areas, right? There's the holiness, the healthiness, and then there's the happiness. But under those areas, like I talked about, uh it's really, there's those seven categories. And there's this amazing quote from my pastor, uh Pastor Keith Loy out of Celebrate here, and he talks about juggling. Right, the average person can learn how to juggle like three things, and then he goes on to say, if you start juggling more, then you become a clown. Right, and so, or I should say, the average person could juggle up to three things. But what I'm saying is like, hey, these are three areas in my life that I want to focus on. But under those three areas, there are the subcategories, and I have them like specifically in a order because these are things that are important to me. And so I'm gonna break that down a little bit in this podcast as we're talking about, you know, holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And so the first one, I'm gonna list them all off. Is you got spiritual health, mental health, physical health, financial health, parent health, or for me, father health, relational health, and then business health. And so I look at, okay, whatever I have goals, these are the subcategories within the three main goals. And so under these goals, there are goals that I intentionally want to work on. And so spiritually, like, okay, what do I want to attain this year spiritually? Mentally, how's my mental health doing? What are some of my mental health goals? What do I want to obtain when it comes to my mental health? And then the list goes on and on. But I also very much so have this list in a very specific order as well. And there is a reason why, because it's kind of like the foundation, right? Each is a foundation to one thing after the other. And so, like, my foundation as a believer in Christ, as a believer in God, um, as a Christian, like, my foundation has to be spiritual health. Everything stems from my spiritual health, like my mental, my physical, my financial, everything stems from that. And so that spiritual health is really the base, because I know that if I'm not spiritually healthy, everything else in my life will go to the wayside. I will be a horrible father. I'll be a horrible friend, a horrible business person, horrible with my finances, horrible with all areas and aspects of my life if I am not spiritually connected to the vine. And by that, I mean be connected to the Lord. And how do I get connected to the Lord? Well, it's simple. It's how many times how many times am I in my Bible? How many times am I praying? How many times am I surrounded by people who believe the same things as me so that I can go out to an unbelieving world and defend my faith? And so all those plays into the spiritual foundation. And then another thing is mental. Like the second thing is mentally. Like if I'm not in the right mental headspace, like at the end of the day, that's not good. That's not good for nobody. It's not good for my son. It's not good for me. It's not good for the people around me. And so that's why it's so important. Like mental health is so important to me because um I have to take care of that. And so I know these past years, I feel like mental health is starting to become more mainstream, and it's starting to honestly be a little bit of a buzzword. But all that being said, is mental health is important. After that is physical health. Obviously, I'm not the smallest dude in the world, and I'm not the most fit in the world, but this is something that I struggle with. And this is something that for me, that like every year is probably one of my top struggles, honestly. And so some of that comes with self-esteem, some of that comes with, getting into the gym and working out and making that a priority instead of making other things a priority. And so there's this amazing statistic out there, that LeBron James spends over $1 million on his health every single year. And so like for this year, I'm just like, okay, like I understand that LeBron James makes a lot of money. He makes a lot of money. But I wonder how much of that $1 million cuts into what his wealth is, or what how much he makes. And so for me, it's just like, okay, I know there's a percentage a month that I'm going to spend for my physical health, to make sure that I'm eating the right things, to make sure that, I have high blood pressure, so that make sure I'm taking my blood pressure medicine, and then also um, like vitamins and multivitamins and brain food, but also taking the time to research as well. And so for me, those are just a couple things when it comes to like when I'm looking at my physical health. And then after that is financial. I'll be honest, this is another area that I struggle in. Like I have a 2-year goal right now. I have a 2-year goal, and then an 8-year goal. 9-year goal, 9-year goal. Um and both of them are a little bit out there, but I'm trying to go after it. And finances, they're tough for me. Like I don't have the best credit score. I don't have the best finances, but it's one of those things that I'm working towards to be better every day, and I have accountability. And so I look at those four areas as mainly, those are really the base. Everything else stems from that. And then after that is fatherly. Like for me, it's like I can care less of what the world thinks of me, but the two most important things are, what does the Lord say about me, and what does my son think about me. And so, for example, like someone can say, "Man, you're a complete idiot because you're dancing around in the, I don't know, like in the store, in the grocery store," which me and my son, we like to goof off a little bit. And we were dancing around, and you look like a complete idiot. I could care less about what that person thinks, but it's more important about making memories with my son and letting him know, like, hey, man, do you remember that time when we used to go shopping and we used to dance around and we used to act a fool and we used to do this and that? Um, and that was a good time. And so for me, it's like father health is important. And the amount of time that I can invest in my son, especially because I only have him 50% of the time on paper. And so for me, it's like, okay, what does that mean? It means that I lose out on 50% of my son's life because I don't get to see him when he's at his mom's house. Luckily, me and his mom have a very good co-parent relationship, but it took a while to get there. And and so for me, at the end of the day, it's like, how am I doing as a father? Checking in. And there's struggles with that. I'm not perfect. I was talking with my barber friend recently, and we talked about one of my biggest struggles, which is time. And like honestly, just to be honest, time should be on this list, which we'll jump back to. We'll jump back to the word time. But so after fatherly, it's relational. For me, I have my 12 guys. I got my 12 homies that are my ride to die, and you'll get to meet some of them on this podcast, and I'm excited to bring them on this podcast. But uh, for me, relational is so important because if I'm not in relationship, like I'm an island, I'm doing this alone, I'm doing this in a way that's not healthy, and so I need men to come into my life and really pour into me. And when I think of relationships, I actually think about um, like Jesus. He had his 12 disciples, right? And I think we live in a day and age where we call everybody friend. Like everybody's my friend, everybody's my homie. And like, yeah, I got a lot of quote unquote friends and a lot of quote unquote homies. But like when I say like my 12, these are and I'm taking this from a podcast that I heard. These are my like, hey, my nighttime friends. Like these are the guys that like if I need to call somebody at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, they're gonna answer the phone. They may be a little bit grumpy, but they're gonna answer the phone. And I'm that for them as well. And I've learned this like going back to like Jesus. I think Jesus modeled this well for us when it comes to the 12 disciples, because at the end of the day, he had his 12 ride or die people. I mean, obviously Judas betrayed him, but he managed those 12 relationships really well. And out of those 12, he had the inner three. And then out of the inner three, he had the one. And so when it comes to me and relational health and my friendships, I look at that as like I have my 12 ride or dies, then I have my inner three, and then I have my one. And each of those 12 people um, play a very specific role in my life. And so what that looks like is one of them may be my friend who's helping me with the finances. And I want to make it clear that this is not just a one-way relationship, it's a two-way relationship where I'm giving them friendship and they're giving me friendship and brotherhood as well. So it's like friends and brotherhood. But it may look different depending on what area or what part of their life they are in. So for example, I have a certain friend who makes a lot more money than me and is in a different part of his life, even though we're around the same age, than I am in my life. And so he's able to help me a lot more than when I can help him. But let me tell you something. If he needs help, if he calls me and says, "Hey, bro," which he did, if he calls me and says, "Hey, I need your help um, hanging a TV," bro, I got you. I can do that. Or, "Hey, I need your help moving something," bro, I got you. Let's do that. And so there's give and take. Or like, "Hey, bro, like I just need somebody to hang out with," bro, I got you. Let's do that. And so for me, it's a little bit of this give and take, but sometimes it's more of like, hey, he's offering me more than I am offering him, but I know that like what I'm offering him is also bringing value to his life as well. And it's in a different way than I see it. And so going back to the friendships, I have 12 of that are ride or die. No, yes, I have other friends that like if they call me at 3 o'clock in the morning or they call me or whatever, I will answer the phone because that's the kind of person I am. But those kind of relationships are more of like ministry relationships, or those kind of relationships are more of like, hey, I'm coming to you because you need somebody in your corner. But I know that those people will not go to bat for me as much as my 12. And so that's how I view friends, because I know that we are not called to be, this is going to be very controversial. I know that we are not called to be everybody's quote unquote friend, because we do not have capacity. Like, I think social media has put us in a place where it's like, oh, yeah, become my friend, become my friend, become my friend, right? But the reality is, I don't have capacity to be everybody's friend, nor does everybody have the capacity to be my friend. But I know that, hey, I got 12 relationships that I can steward really, really well, and that I can say, check in on them either weekly or bi weekly or monthly, and we're still good. And so I focus on those relationships the most because that's what I have capacity for. And it's like not only are we not called to be everybody's friends, but not everybody deserves our time. And what do I mean by that is I feel that sometimes we give time to people, going back to that time thing, we give time to people that don't steward our time well. And what I mean by that is there are people who want to waste our time. There are people who are in it because they want clout or they want this or they want that, and they're not being respectful of your time or your talents. And so you and even me, we have to navigate like what does that look like in regards to who my friends are. And so and this really changed when in 2022 there was a certain thing that happened to me, and I had a lot of people um let me down. Like a lot of people let me down in 2022 in a certain aspect of my life. And I was also going through like a breakup at that time, and I went through a rebound, and it was just a ugly, ugly, ugly situation. Um and at that time there was only one person that was keeping me like alive, which was my son. And I remember I had a friend, a really like he was like a close friend, but I didn't realize how close he was. Come to my house, knock on my door, and take me out to dinner to check on me because I wasn't answering my phone calls. And at that moment, I took inventory of like who are my friends, who are my ride or dies, and then at that moment, I also looked at like okay, um who are the people I can rely on the most? Who are the people that have been there for me? And then at that moment, I was like, okay, like I just felt the Lord say, read your Bible, look at what I did. I'm like, okay, this is what Jesus did. This is what the Lord did. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm gonna have my 12. I'm gonna have my inner three, and I'm gonna have my inner one. And in regards to the inner three and the inner one, sometimes depending on what season I'm in, those places interchange. They interchange, and that's okay. And I don't tell like I tell my inner three like, hey, y'all are my three, but I will never tell them who is my one, because then it becomes a competition. And so, um, and even in that inner three and inner one, like it changes. And I'm not saying you have to do that this way, but I'm just saying this is how I do it. And so, um, yeah, I think when it comes to relational, like sometimes we just get, and I get caught. Caught in this. I'm a people person. I love being around people. I love hanging around people and building them up and stuff. And I'm an extrovert 100%, but I just know at the end of the day, like I can't be everybody's friends. I just can't. And so, um, yeah, so that's kind of like my view on friendships is like you want really healthy friends, you find yourself a wolf pack of 12, and within that wolf pack, you find yourself your inner three and your inner one. And the other part of friendships that I've learned too is we need to start taking friendships more seriously and start to lay out expectations of not only just expectations but also boundaries. So start taking or start writing down or start having conversations about, hey, I want to be your friend. Like, what does your expectations look like for our friendship? Or what are your boundaries? What is too far or what is not far enough, or what are you looking for when it comes to a friend? Because at the end of the day, if you want to be intentional with your friends, I believe laying out expectations and boundaries will grow you as a person, but then it will grow your friendship even deeper. Because then when conflict hits, you're like, okay, we know how to handle this. You get in an argument, we know how to handle this. Um, and so that's for me. I have those conversations with my friends of like, hey, what is expectations? And then also, like, the deeper the friendship, like the more that you can call people out, like on that. Like if one of my friends is just, doing something stupid, well, guess what? I'm gonna be like, yo, bro, what you're doing is stupid, and I have permission to speak into his life because he's given me permission because of the expectations and boundaries. So that is relational. I spend a lot of time on relational, but I think that's important, especially as men. Sometimes it's so easy for us to island ourselves off, and it's so easy for us to just go through the motions when it comes to friends, and not talk about the difficult things because of pride and arrogance, um when that's not what the Lord has for us at all. The Lord wants us to grow together. The Bible talks about how man is not meant to be alone. Yes, we have suitable partners, or excuse me, a suitable partner, but at the end of the day, we need homies that have our back too. And I'm not saying like make it a gossip session about your kids, or your wife or your ex-wife or this person or that person. No, it's about being intentional in those relationships, in those expectations, in those boundaries, so that that person can grow, that brother can grow, but then also that you can grow as well. And so I think the relational one is so important, because you want to be a better father, hang out with, make good friends with other fathers. You want to be a better husband, make good friends with um husbands that are killing it out there. Allow them to speak into your life. And the same with mentorhood as well. Get mentors. And so yeah, that's a lot on relational. Um, and then the last thing, the seventh one is business. And this could be your job. This could be if you're an entrepreneur, um, or you work for a nonprofit, whatever that looks like. I think business is last because so often as fathers and husbands, um, we put our business first. We put our work first before our family because we want to provide. And there is nothing wrong with providing, right? But it's a big old but. When providing becomes ahead of spiritual health or mental health or physical health or financial health or father health, then there is a problem. Yes, as fathers, we got to do what we got to do. We have to provide. We have to pay the bills. We have to do these things. But how much are we willing to sacrifice for the dollar? How much are we willing to sacrifice um, to be away from our family? Or how much are we willing to sacrifice to be with our family? Right? Yeah, like gigs, work is always going to be there. But your kids, they're only going to be one once. They're only going to be two once. They're only going to be three once, four, five. And especially some of those early years are the most formative years of a child's life. And yes, I understand that, like, we have to work, we have to pay the bills, we have to go out and get the grind. But part of it is spending that intentional time with our kids, with our family, with our spouses. Because sometimes at the end of the day, a kid's, especially early on, the kids are not going to care about how much you make or how much things they have. Um, but they are going to be very aware of your presence in their life. And so, for the fathers that are out there that struggle with this, it's very important to understand time. Because at the end of the day, all of this, whether it's holiness, healthiness, and happiness, whether it's spiritual health, mental health, physical health, financial health, fatherly health, relational health, business health, all that, everything comes down to one thing, which is time. How much time are you investing? My phone is blowing up. It's crazy. How much time are you investing in every area? How much time are you losing? Because at the end of the day, as our kids grow, time seems like it goes faster, especially as we get older. But it's the one thing that you will never ever get back. Like, yeah, you lose $100, you can get that $100 back. There's ways to get $100 back. But you lose 10 seconds, you ain't never gonna get that 10 seconds back, no matter how you put it. And so for me, the reason why I set up these goals in the front end is because of the time. I want to make sure that I have the time to set up the year right. And so that I can January 1 go hits, I can go in all areas of these. And so I kind of rambled a little bit. I have my notes, like if you're watching this on YouTube, I have my notes on my iPad, and I hit a lot on that relational aspect, which I think is very important. Um, and so these are things that I'm doing, and I'm not saying this is the right system, because even within the system it can get a little cloggy. But the system is working for me, and I think, like, just I'm gonna ramble a little bit longer here, but like, I shouldn't say ramble. I'm gonna talk a little bit. I think time is just, I can't stress how important time is and how much we waste, right? I think about, like, even screen time, like how much time I spend on social media, or how much time I spend watching a movie, or how much time I spend doing this or that, or the other. And sometimes there's times where, like, for me, like, when it comes to gaming, like, yeah, there's times to game with the homies, you know um and there's times where it's like, all right, this is over. Like, the homies aren't playing video games, all right, it's time to invest in something else. And so there's that time for camaraderie, but it's about managing your time and using your time wisely so that you're not wasting it. And that's really what it comes down to. Um, is like, what are you doing with your time? How are you managing your time? Because if you can manage your time, you can manage your money. If you can manage your time, you can manage a lot of other things as well. And there's so much distractions out there that want to take us away from our kids, from our spouses, from everything else, that, like, I look at this thing, and when I say this thing, I'm looking at my phone here, and during this whole podcast, it has been blowing up nonstop. I probably should have just put it on Do Not Disturb, and that's what I'm going to do right now. But this phone can be the greatest tool, because we have so much stuff at our fingertips, at our disposal, but yet it could also be the greatest distraction and the biggest stealer of time as well. So at the end of the day, a lot of this comes down to time. And what are you going to do with your time? So thank y'all so much for tuning into to this podcast. I'm super excited for the next one. I kind of went off on different tangents, but yeah, the first guest, I'm super excited to have him on the podcast. Uh, he's a good homie of mine. We've known each other for years, and he has a lot to say. And so, anyways, if you guys have any questions or whatever, you guys can feel free to follow the father. You can follow the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow it on YouTube. Um, yeah, just search Bobby Peacock right now. We're in the building stages of this podcast, of the Father Built podcast. Um we are in the building stages. So but on Instagram you can follow me, DJ underscore Peacock. Or you can follow the podcast, which is at Father Built on Instagram. So thank y'all so much for tuning in. We're all about building up fathers in holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And we aim to give you the tools to build your house of legacy. So um, keep building and keep trusting the Lord. And like always, remember peace, love, blessings. We out.